The deep, satisfying crunch of Samwise Gamgee's hobbit boots on the freshly laid path gravel was the loudest sound in the Shire night. He paused on the threshold, drawing a deep breath of the air, cold and crisp, carrying the metallic scent of damp earth and late-season wood smoke. The chill air had settled into his bones during his final inspection of the autumn garden beds. But as he pulled the heavy, round green door shut, the outside world was instantly sealed away. The soft, decisive thump of the latch was a barrier against worry. He leaned back against the solid oak, letting the sudden, profound warmth of his home seep into the cloth of his coat. It was a warmth that wasn't merely from a fire, but from the combined presence of clean wood, baked earth, and deep-seated belonging. His ear, pressed close to the wood, confirmed the absolute silence of the household. Rosamunda was sleeping, and so were all their little ones. They were safe, deeply and securely, in the heart of the hill. Sam pushed off the door, peeling away from the comforting oak. His body was tired, he knew it was, but his mind, stubbornly, was not. It was wide awake, humming with a low, insistent energy. He had learned over the years to distinguish this feeling. It wasn't the frantic, sharp edge of fear, the kind that had driven him across Mordor. This was a slow, rich tide of overwhelming contentment that simply refused to settle into the placidity of sleep. He walked past the peg where his greatcoat usually hung, moving with the preternatural quietness of a seasoned adventurer who had once had to navigate the echoing halls of Moria. Every floorboard was familiar, every step calculated. He told himself he needed to sleep, but the lump remained, a small, hard kernel of wakefulness in the soft center of his chest. It demanded recognition. It wasn't worry, it was the opposite. It was a need to affirm, to count his blessings not in his head, but with his hands and his eyes. He wouldn't light a lamp. He didn't need to. Tonight, Sam Gamgee would conduct a quiet, nocturnal inventory of his small, perfect world. Sam steered his course toward the sitting room, naturally gravitating towards the faint, living glow that emanated from the hearth. He did not light the oil lamp. To introduce a sharp, yellow flare of light felt like an intrusion on the deep peace he was seeking. Instead, he preferred the gentle company of the embers, a heap of old logs that had burned down to the color of dark, molten gold. The light they cast was soft, orange, and entirely without sound. It made the familiar room seem wider and deeper, painting the walls with long, unhurried shadows that weren't frightening, but played familiar, silent games. The shadow of the mantelpiece stretched, elongated, then folded back into itself as a cinder shifted. This fire, this light, was the oldest comfort of Middle-earth. It was a visible promise of shelter, a small, bright point of permanence against the vast, cold sweep of the outside world. Sam settled into his armchair. It was his chair, worn exactly to the shape of his shoulders and thighs, yielding softly where it ought to. The slight sag in the middle was a testament to years of quiet reflection after long days. As he sank into the worn upholstery, he took a deep, deliberate breath. It was the smell of home, the remnants of earthy wood smoke, of beeswax used to polish the mantel, and of the old, reliable fabric of the chair itself. He ran his hand over the wooden armrest, smooth and warm from the recent heat, feeling the grain of the oak, a slow, patient warmth beneath his palm. He was centered now, grounded by the solid certainty of the objects around him, ready to let the demanding kernel of contentment begin its quiet inventory. Sam held his hands out over the lingering heat of the hearth, inspecting them. They were wide, strong, and deeply etched with the story of his life. The scars of rough journeys mixed with the hard, reassuring calluses of a gardener. He watched the firelight dance over the knuckles. He hadn't been an adventurous hand, not really, but a useful one, a loyal one. He could still feel the phantom weight of the spade, the thunk it made hitting the rich, dark soil of the Shire. There was a particular deep satisfaction in physical labor, in the honest exchange between sweat and sustenance. That deep, bone-weary exhaustion was not a punishment, but a gift. It was the only kind of tiredness that earned the right to such a profound, settled peace. He curled his fingers slightly, remembering the cold, smooth handle of his favorite fork, already eager for the morning's work. It was not merely food he cultivated, it was abundance. Sam closed his eyes and conjured the image of the harvest he had seen just hours earlier. The deep, earthy hues of his prize potatoes, stacked like solid gold in the root cellar. The plump, glossy redness of late tomatoes still hanging, protected against the chill. He wasn't just counting heads of cabbage. He was relishing the quality, the sheer, unimaginable best of everything they now ate. The memory was bittersweet for a moment, a sudden echo of grey lands and parched throats. But the darkness dissolved instantly, replaced by the profound, comforting reality of the Shire. He thought of his children, their endless, easy demands for second helpings. They had never known true scarcity. That, Sam realized, was the deepest, most durable source of his unshakable contentment. Quietly, Sam rose from the armchair, his boots padding almost silently on the worn rug, and moved toward the pantry door. It was a shallow cave carved into the hill, naturally cool and smelling faintly of flour, spices, and the sharp tang of vinegar. He didn't need light here. The shapes of the storage jars were etched into his memory. He reached out, his hand instinctively finding the shelf where Rosamunda kept her prized preserves. He gently ran his fingertips over the rounded glass and the familiar linen caps tied with string. Beneath his touch lay the concentrated essence of summer rows of plum jam, pickled walnuts, and robust chutneys. Each jar was a small monument to Rosamunda's patience and foresight, a tangible seal against the lean months. They were not merely food, they were the gold of his wife's careful labor, a treasure far more valuable than any jewel Sam had ever seen in a dragon's hoard. Deeper in the pantry, where the air was coolest, lay the bins of vegetables. Here was the true wealth. Sam knelt and plunged his hands into the biggest bin, letting the cool, dry skin of the potatoes slide against his palms. The sheer volume was staggering, a mountain of earthy promise. He didn't physically count them, but weighed the collective certainty of their mass. This was his version of a fortune, the simple, absolute knowledge that there was more than enough. Enough for his own children, enough for unexpected visitors, enough to share with any neighbor who might fall short. He mentally partitioned the crop for the winter months ahead, a habit ingrained from years as a gardener. It was a comforting calculation, rooted in the Shire's generous soil and his own hard work. This quiet abundance was the antidote to every memory of hunger. Sam left the comforting chill of the pantry and stepped into the kitchen, the true epicenter of his home's daily life. Even in darkness, the room spoke volumes of Rosamunda's meticulous care. He could feel the orderliness of the place. He ran his hand lightly over the surface of the large wooden work table, feeling its familiar smoothness. On the drying rack, the plates and mugs gleamed softly in the stray orange light, filtering in from the sitting room. An organized, quiet army awaiting the morning meal. He picked up a corner of the linen tea towel, still slightly damp from drying the last dinner's plates. The coolness of the damp fabric in his hand brought a sudden, warm memory. Rosamunda, standing by the sink earlier that day, humming a tune as she scrubbed, flicking a playful drop of water at him when he tried to pilfer a crust of bread. This domestic simplicity, the enduring shared chore, was the quiet poetry of their life, and its flawless order was profoundly settling. Standing still, Sam allowed his senses to take a deeper inventory. The strongest scent remaining in the air was a subtle, sturdy ghost of their evening meal. It wasn't a heavy, sharp smell, but a residual warmth. The comforting, savory hint of roasted onion, mixed with the slight sweetness of the apple tart Rosamunda had baked for pudding. It was the scent of sufficiency, of nourishment freely given and heartily enjoyed. The aroma was a final, irrefutable guarantee that the family was well fed, tucked in, and whole. He imagined the plates being scraped clean, the satisfied sighs of the children, the quiet conversation he and Rosamunda had shared over their mugs. The food was gone, but the certainty of its warmth lingered, a final beautiful reassurance that, in this hobbit hole, life was good, safe, and eternally abundant. Settling back into the embrace of his chair, Sam turned his attention to the very structure around him. The hill was quiet, but the house itself seemed to breathe, a low, subtle settling of wood and stone that was its nightly sigh. He reached out and traced the smooth grain of the old, dark mantelpiece. His finger found a minuscule crack, one he had known since childhood, a tiny, familiar fault line in the perfection of the structure. This home was not a borrowed refuge. It was an extension of himself, shaped by his knowledge and labor. He recalled the effort of plastering a section of wall, the satisfaction of carefully placing a new piece of joinery. The imperfections were not flaws, but signatures of time and care, evidence that this shelter was earned, built piece by tangible piece, not just given. This close observation of his sanctuary grounded him further in the beautiful, unshakable reality of the Shire. Sam's eyes fell to the familiar shelf of books beside the hearth. He wasn't looking at the Red Book of Westmarch yet, but at the small, unassuming artifacts that sat beside it. There was a simple, smooth pebble, dark grey and unremarkable to anyone else, given to him by Frodo upon their return, a physical reminder of a distant, ash-choked land now used only as a comfortable paperweight. And there was a pipe, slightly too elegant for his own tastes, a parting gift from Bilbo. These objects, relics of a past that felt as vast as the sea and as sharp as a sword, now served a single, peaceful purpose. They were anchors. They did not pull him back into adventure. They confirmed the profound value of the calm he now possessed. He had seen the world at its worst, and because of that, this quiet, lampless sitting room felt like the most wondrous jewel in creation. The memory of chaos was the final, perfect seasoning for the taste of peace. The deep, satisfying silence of the hill allowed a single, foreign thought to surface, unbidden, like a dark pebble rising in a clear stream. For a fraction of a second, Sam's mind flashed back. Not to the fear, but to the sheer, desolate physical fact of it. The crunch of cinder beneath his boots the taste of ash in the wind, the heavy, hopeless thirst that no amount of clean water could truly wash away. It was a brief, potent memory of a world utterly devoid of comfort. But the phantom feeling lasted no longer than a flicker. The memory, sharp as glass, immediately dissolved against the warm, rough wool of his sleeve and the familiar, smoky scent of the room. The chair held him fast, the hill embraced him deep, and the shadow of that distant land was banished by the undeniable physical presence of his own body, whole and safe, sitting by a peaceful fire. It served only to polish the reality of the present moment until it shone. With the shadow gone, his thoughts settled on the concept of rest. Sleep had once been a stolen, wary thing, snatched on cold stones or amid uncomfortable roots, often disturbed by distant sounds or the ever-present threat of a patrol. Now, in the dark quiet of his home, his own bed waited for him, just steps away. He imagined the simple, incredible luxury of it. The clean, smooth linen sheets, the soft bulk of the feather pillow, the heavy quilt woven by Rosamunda's own mother. This waiting haven felt like the greatest reward of all his journeys. It was not the king's thanks or the return of the Shire that mattered most right now, but the absolute certainty of his own waiting, soft place. This deep domestic preparedness was the proof that the long road was finally and truly over. Moving with the silence of a house elf, Sam glided to the nursery door. It was closed, but the stillness of the hill amplified the small, comforting sounds within. He pressed his ear gently against the wood. What he heard was not just one sound, but a soft, interwoven symphony of sleep. The deep, slow exhale of several little chests rising and falling in perfect, unsuspecting rhythm. It was the most beautiful sound in all Middle-earth. Each breath was a confirmation, a perfect beat of peace. He felt a fierce, protective love swell within him, mixed with a deep, humbling responsibility. He wasn't just guarding his potatoes, he was guarding this profound, perfect stillness. He whispered their names: Eleanor, Frodo, Rose. Each name a gentle anchor dropped into the warm earth of his heart. They were whole, they were dreaming, and by their very presence, they anchored him firmly to the present moment. He moved away from the nursery and paused at the door to his own bedroom. This was the final, most important threshold. He didn't open it. He simply stood, allowing his thoughts to settle entirely upon Rosamunda. She was the architect of this quiet happiness, the one who turned a house into a home, and a tired traveler into a steady man. She was the Shire made flesh-warm, reliable, and endlessly giving. He didn't need to see her to know her repose was deep and well-earned. He thought of her hands, quick and capable, her laughter bright and easy, and the unshakable patience that held their world together. His heart swelled with a silent, profound prayer of thanks, not a request, but an acknowledgement of a gift too great to measure. He stood sentinel for a moment longer, ensuring her rest was undisturbed, before gently turning to face the rest of the silent sitting room. Sam's eyes finally found the shelf near the ceiling, where the object of deepest historical weight resided, the Red Book of Westmarch. It was bound in sober red leather, thick and solid, a tangible testament to things few now remembered. He did not touch it, but merely looked at its quiet, assured presence. It was more than a record of events. It was a physical proof. It contained the terrible, the sublime, and the ridiculous, all written down and safely shelved, making the chaos of the past into a contained, finished narrative. The book represented the finality of their journey. It told the truth so that the Shire might remain blissfully unaware, able to enjoy its peace without question. He, Samwise, was the last hand to have added pages to that immense tale. He had closed the account, drawn a firm line under the figures, and the only entries to follow would be the quiet, unadventurous lists of births and harvests. The weight of the book was a comforting, solemn reassurance that the age of necessity was over. His duty now, as mayor, had nothing to do with swords or spells, but with continuity. His greatest act of courage was not facing a troll, but ensuring the ditches were clean, the roads were mended, and the market was fairly priced. He was the anchor of the present, the man whose hands were equally familiar with a pen and a planting fork. His adventure was the fuel that stoked his current, steady diligence. He realized his role was that of a gentle storyteller, not with words, but with his life. Every day he lived, every onion he harvested, every quiet bedtime routine was a page in the longest, most important chapter of the Red Book, the one that would never be written down. The chapter titled simply Peace. His task was to ensure this quiet, enduring chapter remained the only story his children would ever know. Sam rose from the chair one last time and walked to the small slate-topped table beside the hearth. He poured the last of the cool milk from a jug into his mug. It was simple, plain, and perfectly satisfying. He drank slowly, letting the cool liquid soothe his throat, feeling the quiet, internal inventory of his evening finally come to an end. Every corner of the house was accounted for. Every family member was safe, and every memory had been faced and put back in its place. The combined warmth, the coolness of the milk against the residual heat from the dying fire, created a calming physical counterpoint. His shoulders, which had remained subtly tense even in the chair, finally slumped in complete surrender. All is well, the house seemed to whisper. All is accounted for. There is nothing left to guard but the silence. The final sip tasted like peace. He returned to the hearth, but this time he did not sit. He simply stood, allowing the last fading orange glow to warm his face. He closed his eyes, no longer fighting the wakeful energy, but accepting the deep, profound rest that had finally arrived. He was no longer a traveler, a companion, or an adventurer. He was simply Samwise Gamgee of Bag End. His last waking thought was not of the grey havens or the distant shining west, but of the familiar scent of wood smoke and clean linen, the comforting weight of the hill above him, and the soft, steady rhythm of Rosie's breathing, which he knew waited for him just beyond the door. This little piece of earth, this house full of love, was not just a home, it was the anchor. He opened his eyes, now heavy and welcoming the dark, and with a deep, silent sigh of gratitude, he turned and went to his waiting, warm bed.